If you're going to take on this project, I highly encourage you to watch the entire series, or not series, I guess, watch all of the video all the way to the very end and make sure that you have the ability to see all the mistakes I overcame, hurdles that you might have to work through. There's a lot of important things in there. So I encourage you to watch the entire video before you purchase any materials and make any decisions on anything. With that, let's get to work. All right, for those of you who've been clamoring for me to make a project or DIY project, you win. Here it is. We're going to do a pirate chest that you saw on the icon. I will take you on a step-by-step instructional video, including any mistakes and how we try to fix them. I guess I would consider it intermediate level, depending upon, as far as complexity goes, depending upon the type of materials you want to use. I'll put those in there, as well as the costs, what to look for, what not to look for, everything that you can think of. So we'll go on the journey together, and we'll just try to make it look really nice. You can choose between plywood or planks if you want. If you go with the planks, that's obviously a more complex level, and we'll take you through the glue up on that. And I'll try to use tools that I hope and believe everybody else has. Let's go. For me, I chose aromatic cedar. It's a beautiful wood. It's got great characteristics. It's easy to work with. It smells incredible, and it's very forgiving. What else could you ask for, right? There's two different worlds you can go. You can go with planks, and you can go with plywood. You can get plywood and planks either at a professional woodworker store or even the box stores. You might end up paying a little bit more at the box stores, but you can still get some decent wood there too. Just depends upon what your preferences are and how you want the project to look in the end. Planks there at Woodworker's Source, where I go to, are by the board foot, and that's where they're going to be where you go to any professional store like that. If you go to your box store, it's going to be by the linear foot is what they charge you, and they're kind of close in comparison. Really, again, it depends upon the type of wood that you get. If you go to the box store, you're going to get it S4S, meaning it's been surfaced on all four sides. And if you go to a professional store, they're just going to have planks, but they've been very well kiln dried. They're very straight for the most part, and so there's a lot less to worry about, a lot less to work with as far as having to make sure that you've got a flat plank all the way. I do get it edged, and that's about another $10 more. So my costs for this, with using the aromatic cedar, was about $120. It was like $6.99 a board foot. I got 20 board feet. Plywood, a 4x8 sheet, that is still comparative. I still have to get the bottom, and we'll go into that, but that's going to be 3/8 inch type, 3/8 inch thick wood. The things to avoid when you go for planks. Well, one thing you should do, you should get at least 5-inch wide planks. Okay, 6 inches a bonus. If you get 5 at least, that's good. That includes any kind of messes on the side or just not perfectly straight. But the things to avoid. You want to avoid any wood planks that are cupped, any that are twisted, definitely no twists, and any boards that are bowed. No plank is ever perfect. In fact, if you even get a sheet of plywood, half the time they're not perfect. But when you cut them down, they tend to be pretty decent for the most part. So try to get as straight as whatever the wood is, the materials that you get, as possible. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Now, depending upon how complex you want to get, you can use a handsaw, table saw, miter saw, skill saw. Really depends upon what you have available and how intricate you really want to get, or how much effort you want to put into it. I shouldn't say effort, how much patience you have. I'm kind of constricted for time. I'm trying to get this project done before January, and we are heading into December right now. So I'm not going to assume that everybody here just automatically has a miter saw or a table saw. So we want to build, I'm going to assume you at least have a circular saw, something that's easier and a little bit more portable for your area. So I will go ahead and make a track saw. You've seen them, I'm sure, whether it's Festool or Craig, they work great. If you want to cut a nice straight line, doesn't matter if you're cross-cutting or if you're ripping, you can use this as your to help you assist in your project. It'll make a nice square cut. So in order to do that, I want to make sure that I have a good piece of wood that's roughly 24 inches long. I think that's what this is. You need at least one straight edge. If you can, just cut it off. You can glue that one straight edge on another piece of wood and then just cut it off with your circular saw, which you'll see here in the end. Right now it's a matter of getting two pieces. But you don't want the top piece, if you will, and I'll show you what I mean when we get to that. You don't want the top piece to be thicker than the height when your blade is fully extended down. You don't want it to be higher, or thicker, I should say, than the motor to the bottom surface plate. Okay? Because the reason being is this surface plate is going to ride on the wood. So imagine this piece glued, and this is the other piece. So if I have this on here, this is going to be my straight edge as I'm running it along the wood. If this is too thick, the motor is going to be cocked up, and then I'm going to get a beveled cut. So I want to make sure that it's not wider, not thicker than the bottom of that, and that way it'll run nice and smooth on the surface. So I have a wide piece and a not so wide piece, right? Now I've glued these together, or at least just started. I just literally glued it. But the one thing I didn't want to forget to tell you, make sure that this piece here, that you have enough room to provide for clamps. Because you're going to end up clamping this to whatever piece of wood that you're going to cut. And so it's going to have to go something like this, right? So you're clamping it to the piece of wood. And you have to have room from the back of the motor to the clamp to be able to ride. So this piece here, what did I measure it out to? 5 inches, something like that? Almost 6 inches. Just a scrap piece. So that's plenty of room. Just make sure you got plenty of room for your clamp to the back of the motor on this edge of the surface. Glue it together, clamp it down, let it sit 15 minutes and you're ready to go. Final overall dimensions are going to be 24 inches long by 18 inches wide or deep, whichever you prefer, and 20 inches high. So when you buy your planks, if you're going with planks, make sure that you at least get boards that are 8+ feet long, okay? And especially if they have anything like this on the very end, okay? That's unusable, right? Or at least for the most part. And then also cracks, you can see it extends, about 6 inches up. So those are what you're going to have to work with if you're working with this type of wood. So you're going to cut those off. You're not going to be able to use them. So make sure you account for that when you buy your planks. That's why I say at least 5 inches wide. You want to definitely have 5 inches wide of usable wood, and then make sure you go with at least, I'd say to be safe, at least 8.5 feet, unless you're lucky enough to pick out planks that don't have any checks or uneven cuts at the end, those types of things. So I'm going to go ahead and measure these out. This is going to be, I'm going to use this for my front, because when I glue this together, I want a lot of characteristics. But for me, I don't know if you're going to do the same. For me, I'm going to inset this into the very front. Well, if we're talking 20 inches high, right? 20 inches high, this is going to be right in the middle. That's going to take up a lot of, from the bottom to the very top of it, okay? So it's already going to eat up a lot of that characteristic, this sapwood, if you will, in the pink. And then we're talking 24 inches long, so same for that, okay? So it's going to be what, you got 6 inches left on each side. So I think it still will look all right. And I got a lot of good figured wood. I'm gonna save boards that have more just pink hues for the backside and the sides, if you will. So I think we're good to go. We're gonna press on with measuring this out, and we're gonna use that skill track, that circular saw track that I showed you. And I'll pull that up. It's been 15 minutes. Okay, so it's been at least 15 minutes. Glue's cured as much as it needs to cure. So right now we just need to finish up the track itself. We got a nice straight edge. We got our shelf that it's going to ride on, if you will. And we'll use that here just in a second in order to cut off an end piece, and I'll show you what I'm talking about as far as how this is going to be used if you haven't seen it before. So let's finish up our tool first, our jig. So we've secured our plank, so that's not going to move on us. And we've secured our little sled here, if you will. And so now we're ready to cut. I've lined it up with that line, as you saw, and we're ready to cut this nice and squared off, because that's what we are. We're square to this piece. Ready? It's that simple. So we've got our front and our back panels cut up to 24 and 3/8. We have 4 of those, and then the leftover cuts, those will end up being something like this. And I have another board to go for the sides, because the 16 inches is really what we're talking about, right? And I say that because we said 18 inches wide or deep, so that's the outer dimension. Well, if this is roughly an inch thick, the front wall and the back wall, that's 2 inches. So then that means that the side walls need to be 16 inches. So we have enough material for these 2 end cuts left over. I'm going to cut off this tear out right there, and another one here, and then we'll just go on to the next piece. So about 8 of these at 16 and 3/8 as well, in order to accommodate that extra edge that we're going to need for when we go to square it off. So we have all of the material cut for our walls, front, back, left, right. So now we still need to rip them. We've went ahead and we've cross-cut them to the correct length, for at least the rough cut, I should say. And then we want to get 6 inches. Now that we're going to do a different thing. I said 6, I mean 5 inches. So we will do the 5-inch cut, but then we're also going to do a hollow out of the edge. Seeing Rob Cosman, Paul Sellers, a few other people do it, Rex Kruger, and it creates a spring joint, and supposedly it's the strongest of the joints, so when the 2 pieces come together, they're forced to clamp hard in the middle, and it creates a good bond. So we will put that finished edge up against the fence of the table saw, or if you're using the skill saw, you can still do the same thing. These are 24 inches. If you built your circular saw sled, if you will, track saw, if you built that, you should be able to use that just fine too. Just make sure you did it at 5 inches and rip it on down. So let's go ahead and cut those 5 inches wide, and then we'll go ahead and plane out that hollow in the middle, maybe 4/1000ths of an inch, not much, just a little bit. Now we have them ripped down to the right size. 5 inches, 5 inches. This is going to accommodate that, so we should have 20 inches here. And we do. So I wanted to orient each one of the boards, each one of the planks, if you will, how I wanted them to sit, how I wanted them to look. This works out great because this part of the bone here, I'll be able to chip that out. So yeah, I think that'll work. And then I went ahead and I just drew a line so that if I misplace these boards or whatever, I know how they're supposed to line up. So now I'll go ahead and do the spring joint. And by the way, hold on to your end cuts. You just never know, trust me. Hold on them to the very end of the project. If you don't need them, you can throw them away then, that's fine if you really want to. But you just never know. And just before you end up doing any gluing, do a dry run setup. orient your clamps so that they're in different areas, from the bottom, from the top, opposites. And if you get the opportunity, if you can, I highly suggest using cawls. That helps keep the boards from like bowing in the middle, or one going up and the other one. So that way you can at least have the best chance of success. So I think I'm ready to go ahead and start gluing this panel up here. I'm happy with the way it looks. I don't see any gaps. There's some slight unevenness, but that's to be expected. We could plane or even sand that down for that matter. So I'm happy with it. Let's just go ahead and glue it up. I won't bore you with the rest of it. As far as the other glue ups go, it's all the same. So do all 4 panels, and then those that are using the plywood, you can jump in when that time comes. If you used cawls during the glue up process, it's a good idea to use painter's tape if you've got painter's tape. I highly suggest it. For one, the cawls that you put on there won't stick to it, and it's an very easy cleanup, as you can see. So if you get that opportunity, just get some painter's tape, and these are just aluminum rod that I got, not rod, but I guess you could call it rod. Just got it like Home Depot, nothing big. You can just use those and just cut them in half. They're kind of like 4-foot long pieces. You just cut them in half, and they work great for cutting boards. I've used them many times. Works great. You can also use, as one person chimed in, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, but as far as PVC pipe, 2-inch PVC pipe, that'd probably work too. You just want something, if you're going to use a cawl, you want something that's going to try to maintain flatness. I probably would stay away from the PVC pipe because it has the opportunity to bend. It is plastic. But whatever you use, it'll definitely help out. So the next thing that we're going to jump onto will be checking the flatness of this. We want it to be pretty much as flat as it can be. If you're using plywood, obviously you can't really flatten that anymore. At least I've never tried, but I can't see using a hand plane on it, that's for sure. But I want to try to get this as flat as I can, because the next step that we're going to do is we're going to put this on the saw in order to make some dado cuts for the 3/8 inch plywood, or well, whatever you're going to use for the bottom. So when we do that, we don't want it going across the saw like at an angle or wobbling or something. You're not going to get a nice cut. So we definitely want to make sure that we have as flat as we can get it at the time without going crazy. Okay? So as you can see, this is what I'm talking about. Even with the cawls, it still ended up cupping. But it's not terrible. It's not absolutely terrible. It's totally usable. We don't need them perfectly flat. We're not making a table surface. We're making a box. And so when it goes through the table saw, in order to get that dado in there, I will hold this down as I run it through. So it should be fine. I can't think of anything that would actually make it any worse. So I think we're good. So I'm going to press on to the sanding of these, trying to see what they're going to look like, and then yeah, we'll cut those dados. I'm not going crazy, and what I mean by that is I'm not going to the final stages as far as sanding goes. I've just got it on an 80 grit pad, and I just want to get rid of the wood glue, the tape that's left over, some of the markings, and at least see what the panels look like before we press on with it. Okay. Okay, now with the side panels done, or at least sanded I should say, you could choose to do the inside of them, like this for instance is going to be the inside of the front. You could choose to sand it to a lighter grit, like maybe like 180 or even 220 if you really wanted to go that extreme. I'm gonna leave mine. At 80 grit, I mean, it's the inside of the box. It's actually quite smooth. It might sound weird, but it's actually quite smooth. And I will still put polyurethane on it. But that's the extreme I wanna go. You might want to, if you are going to go ahead and sand it, you might want to sand it to whatever grit you've chosen at this point. Because we're going to move on to making the dado cut at the bottom in order to fit the bottom board. Moving on to that. So we need to put a channel, also called a dado, through the bottom of it. And that's going to fit the bottom board. I was originally going to go ahead and get some beechwood birch, but I have MDF, and there's nothing wrong with using that. In fact, it's a great material to use. It's strong. That's all you need, is something that's strong. You're not worried about aesthetics as far as how it's going to look. You could use OSB if you wanted to, but just want to make sure that it's not going to be something that's going to get slivers. It's not going to get easily destroyed over time, and it's still going to be sturdy or strong enough to hold whatever toys that are going to be put into it, or whatever's going to be put into it for that matter. So again, I'm going to go with this. So whether you've done planks or you've done plywood, hopefully you've already sized them, at least roughly. Make sure that you've chosen what your bottom is going to be. So for instance, this is my front panel. I've marked this is going to be the bottom. This is going to be the side that shows. So when I do my dado, I'm going to do this side. I'm going to do the inside. So this way I know it. So I like how this is oriented. This is going to be the front. I'll choose the side panels to go on there too. I'll also do the same. We're going to be putting the dado on all the cuts, on all the panels. So now using the track saw that we built for the circular saw, I'm going to cut this to the shape. So the overall dimensions of the box internally, okay, is going to be basically, I shouldn't even say internally, it's actually going to be less than 16 inches. 16 inches is the outside width, and 24 inches is the overall outside length. So you add these two panels to that 16, you're going to come up with almost 18 inches. It's not exactly 1 inch, or excuse me, 1 inch per board. So where I'm going with all this is the inner diameter, the inner perimeter is going to be actually smaller, but we still need to make it oversized. Roughly, we want the depth. When the board ends up sliding into here, we want it to come in about 3/8 of an inch. That's plenty to hold it, and that's going to be for all the boards. So right now though, just to say that I'm gonna go ahead and cut this to rough shape. I'm gonna go 16 3/4 by 24 3/4. So that way I am oversized, and once I get these here, the dados done for them, and cut those down to their dimensions, we can always size this. We'll creep up on it, if you will. So let's get started on cutting this to the rough dimensions. So if you remember, if you're doing planks, you'll remember that we don't always get a perfect glue up. In other words, they're not all perfectly lined up. Some boards are shifted a little bit. So in order to compensate for that, we cut them oversized. We're looking for an end of 24 inches. So we have the extra beef, if you will, in order to do that. So we're going to take our track, and we're going to put it on there, and we're just going to trim just enough off of one edge, because the rest of it we'll do on the table saw. Unless you don't have a table saw, of course you can use your circular saw to finish it off. But the one thing you do want to do is you want to make sure that it's square. So what I mean by that is the bottom of this is square to the bottom of your bottom of the plank, the panel. So we're just going to push this up there. If you have a combination square, it works great. And then I'm just going to slide this over until I just have enough showing, and I'll show it to you here in a second. So what I've done is I have a little bit of an overhang on this top piece here, but I ended up squaring this bottom, the actual panel itself, to this here, because I know that that is square. And then I've squared it up here, here, and then that leaves me, as you can see, just a little bit of board just enough. That's a bottom board. But if you look really close, you'll see that there's actually a lip right here. See that? A little bit, and that's all we're going to trim off. And then when we do the overall dimension, we'll end up cutting the rest of it off on the table saw. Or again, you can use this as well, just as long as it's 24 inches. And repeat this process on the remaining 3 panels. If you get a little bit of tear out, don't worry about it. We're going to end up putting edges over this anyway, so it'll cover all that up. So as I mentioned, if you're using plywood, you should be at the point now where you've edged all 4 panels and you've gotten 16 inches wide for the side panels and 24 inches for the front and the back panels. This is where a little planning in advance, if you're using the table saw, a little strategy is to make sure that you place your work pieces in the order that you would orient them to be safe. So in other words, my straight edge that I cut on one of these, because remember, I didn't do the other side because I'm using the table saw for the other side. So I've set it for 16 inches. Now I've placed the boards so that the straight edge that I cut with the circular saw is over here, so when I grab it, I can just turn and place it straight up against the fence. This is important because if you don't have the wood aligned, like this right here, I've got a little bit of wood glue and whatnot, I could place the wrong side on. It's just a way of foolproofing, or poke-yoke as sometimes they call it. So, so this is where we're going to finish. If you did the panels, we're going to finish dimensioning those. All right, so we're done dimensioning all of our panels. We should have 24 inches and 16 inches as far as width goes, and 20 inches and 20 inches for the height. So we're right on, we're good to go. Now it's time to do our dado. So for that, as I mentioned, let me show you exactly what we're gonna do. So we have our front panel, for instance, right? And we have a side panel. I'll just use one of these here. And the inside, we made 16. The overall auto dimensions is going to be 18 inches wide. But if I cut the side panels to 18 inches, then you add this, the front panel and the back panel, you're going to have more than 18 inches. So that's why we did what we did. Now you can see there's the gap there, right? That's okay. We're going to end up fixing that up. That's no problem. So that's just, this panel here was bowed, okay? And you might even have it on this one as well. But again, don't worry about it. Even if you're using plywood, that's what we're looking at. Because we're going to end up securing this with screws, and then this gap is going to end up being covered. And when we secure it with screws, it's going to pull it flat. You can see how it's already doing that just by me, and I'm not really putting anything on it, really. So it'll come together. So we need to cut a channel. Now, we originally talked about using the 3/8 inch thick piece. I'm using 1/2 inch. I believe this is 1/2 inch, if I remember correctly. Yeah, or 1/2 inch. So this is 1/2 inch wood. You can use 3/8. It'll be just as strong. If you happen to have it. If not, whatever. Use 1/2 inch if you want. So as I mentioned, I've already designated this is my bottom. Okay, I've done that for all of my panels. I've written that on there, so I know where I'm going to end up putting my dado cut. And it's going to go at the bottom, because that's what's going to fit this. It's going to be a slot for this to slide into, and then we're going to have all the other 3 panels that are going to go and surround it. But we need to make sure that this cuts into this, so that's what we're going to make now as a dado. I'm going to raise that about, let's say about 1 inch. So the bottom of this is going to be 1 inch up. So the bottom is right here. This is the bottom of the box. So we're going to be 1.5 inches wide is what we need to make the table. So whether you're using planks or you're using plywood, this is where you're going to either use your table saw to cut them, which means your blade, whether you're using a skill saw or your table saw, is most likely just going to be 1/8 inch wide. So you're going to have to take several passes. My suggestion is on the table saw that it's going to be more efficient for you. So you're going to want to do all the panels at the same time. So again, do a poke yoke, set them up the way that you would grab them off your bench or your work surface. So when you transfer them to the table saw, they're all oriented the same correct way. You'll take one pass with one, grab another one, take a pass with another one, and then you're going to end up moving your table saw. This can get tricky if you end up adjusting your table saw the wrong way. So let's say you make the first cut, okay, and let's say you started with the bottom 1 inch. So in other words, I started here instead of at the 1/2 inch mark and worked my way this way. Starting from the 1 inch mark, that's what I'm going to do. Starting from the 1 inch mark, and I'm going to move this way until I get a 1/2 inch groove that goes all the way down. It's very critical that you pay attention to when you make these cuts, because however you move your fence on your table saw, if you're using the table saw, can, like if I started here at 1 inch, if I end up moving my fence one way or the other, or the wrong way I should say, I could end up cutting this way, and I don't want to do that. I want to cut this way. So just make sure you pay very close attention, and the way that you can compensate for that is after you make your very first cut on all of the panels. So set it up, whether you're using your track saw or you're using your table saw, set it up so you make your first pass. My suggestion is, like I said, start with just the very bottom of the whole thing. Make that pass on all of them. Then turn off your machine, whether it's the skill saw or the table saw, and then make the adjustment. And then on the track saw with the skill saw, you'll definitely be able to see, oh, I got to take off the material, it's this way. Best way to do it though is to make a scribe line in order to make sure that you're taking off the right material in the right area. And I'll show you that here in a second. But on the table saw, once you put it down, make sure, just take a quick look and make sure that you're going to be cutting in the right area, okay? So I'm going to mark these off at 1 inch up for all the planks, and then I'm going to do a 1/2 inch, and then I'm just going to put a scribbly line on both ends and the front and the top of the panel so that I know where I'm going to be making the next cut, okay? And this is what I'm talking about. So I've clearly marked the area that I'm going to make my dado. And I've also went ahead and done it on the end so I can see, all right, that's just going to be this lip right here. Now, this is the critical part as well. I mean, this is one of the critical parts. But you're going to want to make sure that you set your depth of your saw blade to the highest tooth at 3/8 inch. And we'll do that right now. So what I've done is I've taken and set my combination square at the 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to take the middle of my throat plate, or if you're using your skill saw, find just basically the middle of the bottom plate of your skill saw. And then you're going to want to take the combination square, or at least however you can measure it. And this, I mean, it's not super critical you get it exactly 3/8 of an inch, but get it as close as you can. So just make sure that the blade isn't too much higher than that. See that? Just a hair. So I'll end up taking that one down. Okay, my boards are oriented so that I can grab them from the back and come straight over to the machine, table saw. And I've already lined it up, so my fence is locked in. I've got this lined up so the first cut, like I said, is going to be on the bottom, and I'm going to work my way with the fence. Every cut that I make, after I make it on all the boards, the next time I make a cut, it'll be moving it over. I'm going to go less than 1/8 of an inch because they're offset teeth on mine. You might have straight, but mine are offset. So I'm trying to get rid of any kind of excess material that's still there. So I'll still be taking a little bit of time to do mine as well. But you shouldn't get any tear out. It should work fine. What you want to do though is you want to keep pressure on this so it's always tight against the fence, okay? Because you don't want the board to be doing this. I'm going to use a gripper. You can use whatever you want. You can use a push stick if you want. I'm using a gripper just to help make sure that I've got constant down pressure as I'm moving it across the table saw. If it helps, you can put a little bit of wax on there too. As far as the skill saw goes and the track saw, it's just going to take you a little bit longer in time, but it should be fine. All right, let's get started. So yeah, that was fun. All right, so we have our dado cut, and the board should fit right in there nicely. Make sure it fits on all the other 3 planks the same way. It might be a little bit of a play, but it's not that much. It'll be just fine. We're going to glue it in. It's going to seat just fine. We got a nice depth to it, so it'll hold no problem. It'll be really nice and sturdy. All right, so we can move on to the next step.